Welcome back to the Pavilion Stream. I'm Angela Jeffries, one of the conference coordinators for the Pre-Med AMSA conference, our 10th annual. And what we have up next is our non-traditional student panel. And we will be just doing a series of questions and answers. And but to start out, if we can just go down the line and just say your name and what year you are and what school you attend.
Hi, my name is Norma Villalon, and I am a second-year medical student at Stanford University.
Hi, my name is Geneva White, and I am a second-year medical student at UC Davis School of Medicine.
Hey everyone, my name is Francisco Solorio. I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Michigan Medical School.
Hi, I'm Donovan Jeffco. I'm a second-year student at Touro University College of Osteopathic Medicine.
So for our first question, why did you guys choose medicine? And we can just go down the line, or
if you don't mind,
yeah, you guys.
I mind going first. Before medicine or academics at all, I really wanted to be a paramedic firefighter. I had the opportunity to do it. I became a paramedic, and there was a lot of moments where my scope of practice could not handle what was in front of me patient-wise. So I really had a lot of energy still that I wanted to give to the patient and to be able to treat them in some way. And so I felt the only way to do that was to expand my scope of practice and become a medical doctor.
I think for me it was more witnessing some of the health disparities in my own community, along with having individuals in my family that had serious health conditions that and had needs that weren't met through the current healthcare system, and wanting to make a change and wanting to bridge the gap between patients and physicians, and wanting to basically do my part as far as being a leader in my community. And I just love medicine. I love the human body. I think it's beautiful, and I think that's some of the things that led me to medicine.
For me, it's very similar. For me, it was my background. I was born and raised in Mexico in this really, really small town, and not having access to healthcare really impacted me and growing up in my family as well. So just from those experiences, I developed an interest in medicine. And then from my science classes, I really, really enjoyed learning about the human body as well. And it's just the most rewarding thing that I could do with my career.
And for me, it was really the challenge of what medicine is going to be, and as well as being able to just go and do something better to help better at least one person at a time and start building a stronger community that way.
So kind of jumping off that question, what makes you a non-traditional applicant specifically?
For me, well, as I mentioned before, I was born and raised in Mexico. So I moved to the U.S. when I was 18. I went to high school for 1 year here, and then I went to community college for 4 years. I didn't speak any English when I moved here, so it took me a little longer to complete my undergrad. I transferred to UC Davis, and after graduating, I took 2 years off to do clinical research before medical school.
For me, I went to community college for a few years. Then after that, I took 2 years off. I worked in a grocery store, has nothing to do with science. I got married, and then I transferred to Sac State, got my degree in biological science, and I took another year off before I applied to medical school.
So for me, in high school, I didn't take high school seriously. I didn't get past algebra. I didn't get past anything higher than very low-level English. So when I came out of high school, I went to paramedic school. I became the paramedic firefighter. I did it for a year. Then I went back to community college. Because I did so poorly in high school, it took me about 4 years as well before I could transfer to the university. Once I transferred to UC Berkeley, I really gave myself to academics in the best way possible. I did basic science research. I did a lot of outreach with Sacramento City College to expose the students from urban underserved communities to the life at a university. because I myself am also an urban underserved person, or what used to be, now I have the privilege to be in medical school. Once I was done with UC Berkeley, I went back to my community to share all of the gems of knowledge in regards to how to study, and why it's more important to do good in school than do good on the basketball court. And that was my route, and why I say I'm non-traditional.
I ended up having to actually go directly from high school into working straight out of there, and then after 14 years in television and actually working my way through my undergraduate degree, I realized that I wanted to do something else that I could be proud of and something I wanted to do the benefit. So I ended up going and actually working my way and getting into medical school.
So community college has come up several times now. So how do you feel transferring from community college affected your application to med school? Did it help? Did it hurt? Did it make you stand out? And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, the community colleges I ended up going to, I actually, in my interview process, I actually had to defend my choices to go and get those components of my curriculum through those institutions. I had to make sure that they knew that the institutions were high quality institutions who actually focused on teaching the curriculum that was necessary. But once I was able to get the admissions committees to see that, then it wasn't much of a problem after that.
I think I went to community college just to take care of my general education requirements. I took a few science classes there as well, but I never came across having to defend my choice to go to community college to take care of my general education requirements. I think just going to community college, one of the challenges that I faced was just, I think just trying to stay focused and trying to stay motivated. It seems like for me, my experience, it was really easy to kind of get discouraged. You know, you have students from a lot of different backgrounds and they have a lot of different agendas. And so I think one thing that I would say, just coming from a community college, my educational career is just to stay focused and keep your goal in mind. If it's medicine or whatever it may be, just stay focused and keep your goals in mind. Yeah.
I took all my pre-med requirements at the community college, and I never had to explain anything. Nobody ever brought it up during my interviews, so I definitely don't think that prevented me from getting anywhere. And I think that as long as, when you transfer, as long as you keep your GPA up, I don't think that should be a problem at all. And, you know, as long as you show consistency. So it wasn't a problem for me at all.
In my case, I felt it was very advantageous because a few of the friends that I had that were fortunate enough to get into university right away, they did have aspirations and dreams of being lawyers, doctors. However, they partied a lot. They were hanging out big time in the dorms. They were out and about in wherever college they were at. And because of that, their grades suffered a lot, and they weren't able to go into the careers that they originally wanted to. While they were doing that and I was in community college, I really was able to defend and raise my GPA. Also, being at Sacramento City College allowed me to stay in touch with my community and be able to identify what was the disconnect in regards to why so many people weren't making it to university, why so many people were dropping out of classes, and it allowed me to become part of that solution. So it was very advantageous, I feel.
As non-traditional students, have you, how do I want to phrase, what challenges have you faced in the application process? You touched a little bit on in interviews and stuff like that. How has it shaped your pre-med, like, transition through the application process?
I think if anything, it helped me. Most of my interviews, I want to say all of my interviews, were focused around what I did during my time off and how my experiences have shaped me and me wanting to go into medicine. So I feel like being a non-traditional student and taking time off actually gave me a huge advantage. All my interviews were focused around that.
So just to make sure that I have the question right, you said, were there any obstacles during the application process?
Yeah, any challenges that you faced as non-traditional students?
Okay, so the biggest challenge was realizing that me being there was the cogency as to why being in community college is just as good, if not better, as being at the university. So it was a little tough having that weight on my shoulders, but when I would reflect back onto all of the people that helped me out, all of the counselors and advisors I had, and all of the people that I needed to get this done for to be able to help them out, it really, really gave me a lot of energy, and it no longer became an obstacle, but a source of inspiration.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's more of an internal conflict that you have. I don't know, sometimes it feels like just being a non-traditional student that you're less than and that you don't have as much to offer, but as a non-traditional student, you have a lot to offer. You have a lot of personal life experience that's going to help you to become a really great physician, and that's going to be help you to be able to interact with patients on a level that other students may not be able to. So I think it's more, as I said earlier, there's an internal struggle that you have to just tell yourself that you are valuable and that you do have something to offer to the medical community, and that even though you are a non-traditional student, that doesn't mean that you're less than and that you can't become an awesome physician.
Well, I noticed for me was just after a period break between the end of undergraduate and the beginning of med school, was actually just getting started and getting back into the whole mindset of the student as opposed to being out there and working and having just the day-to-day work process. And so that by itself was very daunting. And then, like they were saying, making sure that you feel like you're actually worth, you're worth that same seat that some kid that's 22 coming out of the university. You're just as worthy of that seat as they are, if not more so with some of the other skill sets that you can bring to bear into the medical school.
On our last panel, the traditional med students talked about how non-traditional their classes are, that the traditional students make up more like 15% of the current population of med students, and that, at least at UC Davis specifically in this case, and have you found that to be true? Have you found that mostly it's becoming more and more non-traditional students? And if so, why do you think that's becoming more and more the case?
I definitely see that at my school. A lot of my classmates, I want to say about 20% of them have taken time off already, and I feel like I said, this just gives you an advantage because you have so many life experiences that you bring to medical school that other people may not have. So, I mean, you're already a competitive applicant as it is by taking time off, and I feel like schools are valuing that more and more because you can connect with your patients more. And like we were talking earlier, this brings a professional side of you. It makes you more professional with your patients, and it makes it easier for you to interact with them.
At Toro, we're actually very heavily weighted towards non-traditional. I would say probably close to a 50-50 split now. Our oldest student is in their mid-40s with, I think, 2 kids, and we have ones all the way down to some of the traditional ones that are just coming out at 22s and 23s. And you can definitely see a significant difference between the types of student. So being a non-traditional, the schools I see as tending to value the skills of the non-traditional student, the experiences that we've had, as much more valuable to their future prospects as physicians than they used to.
At the University of Michigan, there is a strong representation of traditional students, but there still are a fair number of non-traditional students. And the way that, even though there is a difference between the two groups, we really work well together in helping each other out. Right away, because I was adjusting back to being the student, like what Kevin was saying, no, not Kevin, Robert, right? Don, sorry, like what Don was saying earlier, that was difficult for me, being the student. So I relied on my traditional student counterparts to help bring me up with them. And then during the clinical experiences, some of the traditional students sought me out for help. So it's a very, we helped each other out a lot.
Yeah, and I attend UC Davis Medical School, and I agree with the stats. There's quite a large number of us are non-traditional. So yeah, the numbers are increasing.
Cool. Can you describe your path through the application process, like how your original application was, how your secondaries went, how the interview went, just, key moments on the path?
I would say it's a roller coaster. For me, it was as far as starting my personal statement for my application. I started early. I had a number of people review my personal statement and give me a lot of good feedback. So when it was time to turn in my entire application, I was ready. And I would say one thing that I didn't know in applying was how much time the secondaries took to fill out. The secondaries kind of come in, as I'd say, rolling. They kind of come in whenever the school is ready to send them to you, and you have a deadline to turn in the secondaries. And so for me, filling out the secondary applications was like a 9-to-5 job. I was always writing. It was exhausting at times because you want to get your secondary in on time. However, you want it to be really good as well. You want it to be well written, and you want it to be representative of who you are, and you want to answer the questions correctly. And then I would say just after, getting the interview, saving up money to go on the interviews, deciding where I was going to interview and where I wasn't, and then waiting for the call. That's why I say it's like a roller coaster. You have the ups and downs, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Definitely a big roller coaster. I started working on my application in May. So the application opens in June, and I submitted my primary in July, the first week. I also had a number of people read my personal statement and give me feedback. I actually wrote 2 personal statements because I was working on the first one, and after having so many people review it, it turns into something that you may not recognize anymore. So I had to start from scratch again. And it really worked out for me. It's true, you get your secondaries and you have to keep on top of everything because you might get 3 in one day, and then you don't want to take too long to submit them. For me, it was hard because I had a full-time job and a part-time job, so I was working 7 days a week and working on my applications, my secondaries. So, looking back, I don't really know how I did that. It's kind of crazy, but you just have to do it. I applied to a lot of schools. I applied to 32 schools because I didn't think I was going to get in anywhere. I just wanted to try because I was ready to apply. And as soon as I started getting secondaries back, I had to cut down on the number of applications that I actually wanted to complete. So I ended up completing my applications to only 18 schools out of the 32. Then from that, as you start getting interviews, you have to choose, because obviously if you go out of state, that's way expensive. You have to pay for your flights and your hotels. So I cut down on those 2, and as soon as you get an acceptance, then you can start choosing. So for me, I wanted to stay in state, so as soon as I got an interview or an acceptance from a school in California, I started to decline the other schools since that was my top choice.
To continue with the roller coaster theme, as you go up the roller coaster, definitely that's when all the planning is going on. That's when you get those 3 people on your side and ready to be able to review 3 or 4, to be able to review your personal statement. At that same time, recognize and appreciate the power of the Excel sheet. Set up an Excel sheet with, this is what I did. I set up an Excel sheet with all the schools I got into, what date I applied, whether I got rejected, at the primary application, when I got the secondary, if I filled the secondary out, and what date I sent the secondary back to them. You are going to need a lot of money. It is a significant amount of financial commitment. So as you're going up to the top of the roller coaster, before you hit the submit button, be ready to have people make sure to have people on your side that are going to be able to let you allow you to loan money if you don't have a full-time job or you just don't have the financial resources there. And they do, every school you apply to with the primary application, be ready to do the secondary. I didn't have much confidence in myself as an applicant, so I applied to 25 schools. I got 24 secondary applications back, and I didn't expect it. It really surprised me. So sadly, I had to prioritize which schools I really wanted to get into, and so I ended up applying to 15. I ended up submitting 15 secondary applications when I could have, if I was ready for it, I could have submitted all 24. So it's a lot of prep, and it's to be the most successful. It's a lot of prep.
Definitely a lot of prep leading up, especially to that interview, which would be the peak of that first fall on the roller coaster, with the wait until you get the acceptance as that drop, because that was the worst time of the thing. Is you're just wondering how bad is it gonna, are you gonna get in, or are you not gonna get in? But yeah, the financial commitment just to get the applications is significant. I was lucky. I only had to apply to 8 schools, and I got 3 acceptances out of that. So I was very lucky and didn't have to go too badly into debt for that portion of my education.
If I can add something to that, there's this fee assistance program through AMCAS that helps you pay for your primaries and also helps you for the secondary. So the program, if you get it, it gives you 14 applications for free. So I had to pay for the rest of them, so like more than half of them still for the primaries. But then for the secondaries, most of the schools waive the fee if you get the fee assistance program through AMCAS, so I didn't have to pay for any of my secondaries. So look into that. Take advantage of all the resources available.
This is a question from online. As non-traditional students, did you feel that you had to have a higher GPA and MCAT score to stay competitive, or did you feel like it was fine to be on par, so to speak?
I think you always want to have the highest you can. You never conform to whatever number. You always want to do the best. But I don't think that, for me, I don't think being non-traditional defined that for me. You always just shoot for the best and see how you do.
And no, I didn't find it having any real impact on my acceptance to the school as to whether or not I had pushed harder and pushed higher than them. I was able to fall back with the other skills that I've picked up from being out of school and use those as adjuncts to help boost up my resume as opposed to cranking out the highest scores possible.
Nice. Moving on. You guys mentioned how many schools you applied to. So when deciding which schools to apply to, what aspects of the schools did you choose? Like what made the cut, so to speak, about that was worth sending out the application for? Or especially, as you said, you guys had to narrow down for the secondaries. Like, what were the aspects that helped every time you had to make that cut on applications?
For my primaries, I pretty much applied everywhere. 32 schools is a lot. But I narrowed it down to like all the California schools, and then from out of state, I just looked at how many out of state students they took, because you don't want to apply to a school that only takes 1% of out of state. That's going to give you a really low chance. So that was one of the criteria. And then for secondaries, I had to look at their secondary and how much time it was going to take me. I mean, I already knew that if I got into that school, I would go. So, it made the first cut. So it came down to what I could do and with the time I had. And that's how I chose my secondaries. Obviously, I kept all the California schools since my priority was to stay in state. And then from that, again, for interviews, it was, again, the same thing, schools in California. And I went to all my interviews that I got in the state.
I would say, to add to what you're saying, all of my criteria was about the same. One thing I added was just the cost of being an out-of-state student and how much that would cost per year, because I didn't want to be, medical school, you're going to be in debt, but there's some schools where, it's a lot more if you're an out-of-state student, so that was one of the criteria that I used in addition to the ones that you said.
A resource I used for the primary application portion was, it comes from the AAMC. It's called the MSAR. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it pretty much has the GPAs, the curriculums, and the MCAT scores, and what activities, like, not activities, but more how they done research, what pre-med requirements do they have? And so I used that as my primary gauge as to whether or not I was going to apply to a school. And then once I got all those secondaries back, it became, okay, which schools do I really want to get into? And which schools do I really want to get into, and which schools am I going to pay all that money for? Because the secondaries, they can be anywhere from as low as $35 to as high as $120. And so the AMSAR was how I started it, or MSAR is how I started it.
I went and then I was looking at it. I looked at faculties and curriculum and what sort of benefits that school, the individual schools I applied to would actually have with what kind of physician I wanted to become. And then I used that as my primary winnowing factor. And then from there, I looked at location, cost, and seeing what was going to be capable of being done. And I ended up in a place that I like, at a school I enjoy, and that I'm very happy I went to.
We have another online question. As non-traditional students, do you guys have any advice about getting letters of recommendation? Often for non-traditional students, they've either been out of school for a couple years or may have, just not have as close of a relationship maybe with professors as traditional students may have.
Yeah, so I got three of my letters of recommendation from community college professors, actually. That was never a problem, which is not what I had heard in the past. I heard you need to get your letters from your four-year institution, not from your community college, but I didn't. I kept in touch with my community college professors, and I really had a good relationship with them. So I think more than the title of your recommender, what matters is the content of the letter. Whatever they write, if it's going to be a strong letter, it doesn't really matter who it comes from as long as it really speaks highly of you. I did get one letter from somebody here at UC Davis, but like I said, most of my letters came from community college.
My experience paralleled Norma's, and it's because I had an excellent pre-med advisor at UC Berkeley who's actually in medical school now. So she told me to go with my community college letter writers because that's going to add, it's going to show that you are the same person when put into context with the letters of rec I got from the university professors and representatives. And actually, I'd just like to say that being in community college, you have an advantage of getting a closer relationship with the professor, and it's because the office hours just are not that cracking when you go to office hours at a community college. It's usually like 3 or 4 of you, as opposed to when you go to university office hours, there's like 20 with plenty of people in the hallway trying to listen as to what's going on. So. And for those that have been out of school for a little bit and you decide, okay, now I need to get those letters, the best way to do it is just to pop in and put yourself back into context. Hey, hello, Professor Davis. I took this chemistry class with you about 4 years ago. You probably don't remember me, but I really did enjoy your class because of these reasons. This is what I learned from you, and this is how I've used what you taught me throughout my life. That's going to put you in the best light possible to the professor. It's going to show them that you did care. And then that's where you can begin the relationship. Don't expect a very strong letter just from an intro like that and then a month later asking for it. Mm-hmm. You have to be strategic and allow at least a year of checking in with that professor, of showing that professor what else you're doing to go along the path of becoming a doctor. So then that way the professor will be able to give you a very strong letter of recommendation.
And make sure you ask, because it's really important. You don't want to just go and say, oh, can you write a letter of recommendation for me? You need to make sure that they are comfortable enough writing a really strong letter for you. Don't be afraid to ask, because if they can't do it, then you don't want their letter.
Yeah, and all those things that said for the academic letters also go for any sort of clinical letters of recommendation as well. Going in and shadowing a doctor for an hour or 2 hours or even a day to get your letter of recommendation is not going to really show much, but if you can get the time to spend weeks of time hanging out and learning from them, you actually will get a much stronger letter of recommendation from them. And that will give you, because all my academic letters were from community college. And so I bumped it up by making sure my clinical letters were also very, very strong. And that helped me tremendously in all my interviews.
What do you think was the strongest aspect of your application?
I think for me, in undergraduate, I always knew that I really loved working with children. I really loved working with kids. And I really had an interest in oncology, just because of some of the family issues that I had. You know, had family members that had passed away from cancer and that were going through, battling cancer. And so for me, all of unconsciously, I didn't realize this until I was applying, but a lot of the activities that I got involved with kind of went along with working with children and working in populations of people who have cancer. It was kind of weird when I got to the end of applying. I worked one of the programs that I worked with that was really long term was it was a camp called Camp Okaizu, and it's a camp for children and their families who are battling cancer. And I did that long term, and I did it for about 3 years. And then also, I helped take care of a family member that unfortunately passed away of cancer, and doing a lot of other activities as far as like working with children outside the hospital setting, and working with sickle cell outreach in the African American community, and children and their families. And so I think for me, one of my strong points in my application was that the admissions committee could see my passion, and when I talked about the things that I had gone through in my personal statement, and how these activities, what I've taken from these activities, and how this is going to make me a great physician in the future, and how these activities and what I've learned from them is going to help me continue on with medicine. I think that really shined in my application, and it convinced the admissions committee that I had passion in specific areas of medicine.
I'd say mine was the same. It was the obvious growth of me as a person and a future medical professional, from starting in paramedicine and then going into basic science, and then from there using basic science to try to progress the world of medicine. And also working with urban and underserved communities to try to increase their presence in higher education. So those things really displayed how much passion I had for the urban and underserved, how much passion I had for translational medicine. So there was not one aspect of the application, but the whole application. It showed that I really was into it, and this was not a game for me. This was not something I needed to do to get a job, but it's the way I wanted to lead my life.
The application should be an intensely personal thing, all the way from your boards, from your scores, all the way down to the personal statement. And I think everyone here has been, that's what really got them in, was that personal avatar, if you will, of what the application is. It needs to be you, and if it's not you, then it's not going to serve you well as getting you into the interviews and getting you into med school.
For me, I think one of the strong points in my application was my distance traveled and what I've been able to accomplish up to this point. As I mentioned before, I was born in Mexico and I moved here when I was 18. So my parents only have an elementary school education, and nobody in my family has ever even gone to high school. So coming here, not knowing the country, the education system, the language, was a really huge challenge, and not having that support from my parents academically was really, really hard. And so I feel like just being able to navigate on my own, navigate the system, was something that made my application really strong. And also, like, as you guys were saying, you don't really realize what you're doing and like the pattern that you put in your application until you see it all together. And for me, it was serving the Latino community and using the fact that I speak Spanish to work in different areas and do research and do volunteer work. And so it wasn't until I put it all together that I saw that, and it was like, wow, this is really what I want to do. Cool.
What do you guys feel is one of the biggest mistakes pre-med students make during the application process?
Waiting too long to submit your primary application. And it could be because, you're just not confident enough. You're thinking that you hear other rumors as to when you should, if there's that secret date when every med school is going to see it. I'd say is taking too long to pull the trigger to submit the primary app.
I agree completely. I think that, and I think this is something we see particularly with minority students. They always wait till the last minute to submit, and I don't know, like, I feel part of it might be the confidence thing, but also maybe they're not getting the proper advice to submit early. And so, like, that's really, really important, and that's something that you should take away from this presentation, if anything, because that really could affect your chances of getting in.
Not being honest. You need to be absolutely honest with yourself and with your application, and if you're not doing that, then those interviewers can see right through it. They've interviewed hundreds and thousands of people, and if you're going to try to pull one over on them, I've seen, even in my interviews, I saw a number of people who tried it, and most of them, very few of them ever got into medical school. So being honest is the biggest thing for me.
How has medical school met your expectations? How has it been exactly as you expected? Or alternately, how has it been completely, radically unexpected?
I think I didn't expect the coursework to be so much. I remember being a pre-med, and it's like, yeah, I know, once I get into medical school, I'm gonna have to study harder, and everything's gonna be accelerated. But I don't think I really understood how much more I've studied, and it's amazing because your brain just accommodates. I mean, like, you don't think like you can sit there and study for so long and retain that information, but somehow your brain makes room, and and it's very doable. And I think one of the best things about medical school that I really enjoy is being able to take what I learn and apply it in the clinic. The school that I go to, they have a number of student-run clinics, and so on the weekends we're able to go in and see patients and present to physicians the patient's case and work through the patient's case and a possible diagnosis. And it's really great to be able to use what you've learned and to know that what you're learning is going to matter. I think in undergrad, it's easy sometimes to feel like, man, I'm learning in physics, I'm learning, velocity and all this stuff. Like, how's this gonna, how am I gonna apply it? But however, in medical school, everything you're learning is important. Everything you're learning one day can save someone's life. So I think that's one of the best things about medical school that I enjoy.
I agree with you. I think that we all know it and we all hear it. Medical school is really hard and the pace is super, super fast. But you don't really know what it's like until you're actually there. You won't really know it. And it's true, you just adjust. You have to do it. And I agree that everything you learn, it's really important. But then at the same time, if it is important, you'll hear it again. Yeah. You don't have to learn it the first time. And I feel like for med school, you have to, you obviously, you want to study everything, but you have to learn to prioritize. You have to learn to pick and choose what you want to study, because you can't do everything. You just can't. It's not possible. And another thing that really surprised me about medical school is when you're an undergrad and you want to get opportunities to do research or to participate in any extracurricular activity, you have to beg people to give you a chance. You have to send emails, you have to send, go talk to professors, make appointments. Once you're in medical school, people beg you to do things for them, okay? People beg you to participate in the research and get publications and things like that. So the problem is not getting the opportunity, the problem is knowing when to say no.
Getting the chance to see somebody come into one of the clinics and actually, where you're being a primary treater or a primary physician for them, and actually getting your diagnosis, like she said, and actually having them hobble in and then walk out. Just seeing them just literally walking out just in pain, without pain that they've had for 10 years, is entirely worth every late night studying and every horrible test that you have to go through.
For me, it's been the collaborative nature. I'm very fortunate to be at an institution that is pass-fail for the first 2 years, and so I was accustomed to being very quiet, to being selective with who I shared all of the information with, because I'll share information with anyone, but it's just the real good stuff I would be selective with. But at med school now, everyone shares everything with each other. Everyone gives the best study tools. Other people are going out on, are doing anything they can to help each other out. And being in that environment has been very invigorating for me because it makes me want to care for everyone else so much more.
Also touching on med school, what study techniques have you found have helped the most in med school, especially with memorizing all that information?
Collaboration with fellow medical students. I didn't have any friends that were pre-meds that were in the basic science. I had very few, and so it was always up to me to do it guerrilla warfare style and go in by myself and handle it. But now there's so much information that it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me to handle it by myself. So I had to rely on the genius of my fellow classmates to be able to explain stuff to me. And in that way, I think we save probably like an hour of studying by yourself with just a good 5-10 minute run through with someone on a topic. So the collaboration, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of one of the transitions that you have to get accustomed with when you enter into medical school, because in undergrad it's kind of cutthroat. Like everyone's competing with each other. Just people are trying to figure out what you got in the class and where they measure up. However, in medical school it's really collaborative. Everyone's helping each other out. Well, it's at UC Davis, that's how it's been. So like you're saying, the time you take, an hour going over something that you really don't understand, there may be someone else maybe made an outline or a spreadsheet that just explains it just so simply, and you're like, oh, I finally get it. I saved time. And then also, I think it's kind of, in entering medical school, I thought I was like 90% visual, and maybe 10% kinesthetic. However, I've learned that I've had to adjust my learning styles depending on what subject I'm learning. So I think that's, for me, it's been one of the more difficult parts. Is just each block or each semester, we're learning about something new and just trying to cater and adjust my study techniques and my study styles to fit a certain class. Because studying for pharmacology and studying for physiology, they're a little different, So just understanding how you study and the best way you learn, and being open to kind of tweaking things and changing things is really good.
I agree with what they said. You really rely on your classmates and you collaborate a lot with them. Like for us, we have study guides that people send all the time when it's close to midterms or finals, or anytime somebody decides to create a spreadsheet or a study guide, they just send it to the entire class, and it's just really nice because you may not get something, but if somebody else gets it, it's so much easier if it's a classmate explaining it to you, because sometimes professors are not that good at explaining things. So you really want to hear from somebody who has your level of understanding.
It's definitely the ability to share between the people in the class, and then also being able to be the teacher for your classmates as well as being the student from them, so that you can each reinforce each other's understanding.
I think moving into our final question, actually, what piece of advice do you wish you had received as a pre-med, especially during the application process, that you perhaps didn't receive? Like looking back, is there some piece of advice you would give yourself, for example, about the application process?
I think for me, it would be how much time it takes to complete your secondaries and to stay on top of everything from the beginning, from getting your letters of recommendation, from writing your essay, submitting on time, knowing how many schools to apply to, and just not, if I could go back, I wouldn't have been working a full-time job and a part-time job and applying at the same time. That was not fun.
I think for me, I probably would have saved up a little bit more. I also I applied for the fee assistance program, and I was able to get assistance for my primaries. However, I applied to 25 schools, so I did have to pay for quite a number of schools. I had to go to family members to ask for help, and paying for that. But I think looking back, I think I would have tried to like at least put away a little money to the side to help pay for the primaries, and then like Norma was saying, just understanding how the secondaries. Just I didn't understand quite how much time it would take to fill them out, and to the rat race of turning it in and wanting it to be really well written, and then just getting those things in. I kind of wish I would have known. I would have been able to mentally prepare for it a little better.
My experience, pretty much the same. I wish I would have saved sooner in regards to applying to medical school, sending in the primary apps, having money for the MCAT, having money to fly for interviews. That was really big. And also taking seriously sorry this sounds really ignorant, but taking seriously the primary applications I sent out. Like I said earlier, I didn't expect to get pretty much all of them back, and I did. And because of that, it was like I did it for no reason, because I wasn't ready to put the time in for the secondary applications. So definitely taking the primary application seriously when you check the box off of what school you wanted to go to.
In addition to what everyone else has said, I would also have to add, just know yourself before you get into the process, because you're going to find out more things about yourself just applying to medical school, much less going to it, than you ever thought you know before. And if you can spend the time to really know why you're doing what you're doing, it'll help you out in the long run and allow you to avoid a lot of costly mistakes.
All right. Well, we want to thank you so much for your answers and for spending the time giving us your advice, and really just this was wonderful. And thanks also to our online audience. And we'll be having more panels tomorrow. And thanks again so much for coming out and doing this.
Everyone online, try to make it out next year. There's a lot of networking that goes on behind the scenes that are very, very beneficial. I started off as a participant, became a volunteer, and then now I'm very lucky to be a medical student. So the very beginning of being a participant was really what I felt pushed me into going all in with medicine. So try to get here.